Well, many promises have been made today at that climate summit, and with the US President-elect Joe Biden promising to re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement, might 2020 be remembered as a positive year for tackling climate change? Natalie Bennett is a Green Party member of the House of Lords and a former leader of the Green Party. Lord Deben is a Conservative former Agriculture Minister and Secretary of State for the Environment, now Chairman of the UK's Independent Committee on Climate Change. Good afternoon to you both. Natalie Bennett, there seem to be lots of reasons to be cheerful about the future of the planet after hearing the fine words at the summit today. Should we be cheery?
Well, I think we should first of all celebrate how far we've come. And if we're talking about the UK announcement about export finance, there are people who've been campaigning very hard on that issue for many years. And indeed, only 3 days ago, Boris Johnson told Green MP Caroline Lucas in Parliament that it wouldn't be possible to do it. So that's a step forward. But what we're hearing is lots of good words and lots of promises. What we're not seeing is the real concrete action. And if we boil down the export finance announcement, the government is saying there'll be, quote, limited exceptions. They're also saying that they may still approve things up until February 8 during the consultation period. And, you know, the kind of thing we're talking about there is an oil pipeline in East Africa that could create 33 million tonnes of CO2 a year. So we're hearing we've made real progress on the rhetoric, on the talk. And I had a radio host the other day say to me, oh, everyone's talking green now. And that's true. But what we need is the action, which is not yet being delivered.
And Lord Deben, people listening to the pledges made today may well wonder, are a lot of these plans actually going to affect the poorest in society the most? If you're talking about buying new non-gas boilers, well, they're more expensive. Electric cars, they cost more still.
Yeah, but if we don't do it, it'll be very much worse for the poorest because the poorest suffer most. So what we have to do is to do it in a fair way. And that's why the Climate Change Committee has insisted upon a 68% reduction in our emissions. The government has accepted that. But I agree with Natalie, as I often do. I agree with Natalie that we want the action now. And one of the actions is that the government must help the poorest and those areas of the country that have most difficulty to change. And that is a common thing. We have to do it as a society. Those who can should pay, and those who can't should be helped to be able to make this change.
And we are talking major changes to people's lives, their lifestyles, if the current targets are to be met. Natalie Bennett, people may agree with or pay lip service to tackling climate change, but there is very little sign as yet that they would be happy if, for example, we stopped building new roads or building new airports.
Well, I think in terms of building new roads, this is another place where the government's rhetoric doesn't and action don't match up. 27 billion new roads. And what we know is, of course, that's not just more carbon emissions, more climate emissions. It's also more air pollution, which we have a huge problem with. And what that does, new roads do is they induce more traffic. It's trying to build your way out of congestion is impossible. What we need to do is walking and cycling and public transport. But coming back to Lord Deben's point about having to make sure that people are compensated. A lot of the changes we're talking about, things like you focused on replacing gas boilers, but what needs to be associated with that is a huge program of home energy insulation, of home energy efficiency. And if you do that, what you do, of course, is you cut people's bills, you ensure they have warm, comfortable, affordable to heat homes, and you also create right around the country, not just talking about levelling up, but spreading out around the country, opportunities for small businesses, opportunities for many, many jobs. This is a way in which we improve people's lives, get healthier, save the NHS money. All of these are the super policies that are good for people, good for our poorest areas and good for the environment.
There are, we're told, a lot of reasons to be cheerful today, but the climate activist Greta Thunberg doesn't seem to think that things are going so well. Looking at her Twitter feed, she's talking about net zero loopholes, empty promises. Lord Deben, does she actually have a point?
Oh, of course she does. And that's very important. We need to have pressure all the time. And the government has got to have its feet kept to the fire. That's what the Climate Change Committee is about. We have now laid down a very clear route map to be able to reach net zero in 2050 without these loopholes. And the government has already started, but it's not anything like enough because we've got to make up for all the wasted time and the mistakes we've made, like not having eco homes in 2017 when we could have had it. That was a quite wrong step by the Conservative government at the time. We've now got to put that right and put it right as quickly as possible. And we've got to make a fair transition. And therefore, the things which Natalie Bennett has talked to are all in the report of the Climate Change Committee, which we published earlier this week, and which the government has clearly welcomed by accepting the really tough but quite doable figure of cutting our emissions by 68%. And it's going to cost us less than 1% of our gross national product, largely paid by the private sector rather, and the public sector can do its bit by encouragement and giving security to private investment.
Natalie Bennett, do you think that the pandemic has changed the way that we think about the environment, the way we wish to deal with nature?
I think there's three things to say about that. First of all, it has highlighted that we are part of nature and that by destroying biodiversity, by unbalancing the planet, we put ourselves at risk. Zoonoses is a word that lots of people have learnt that they didn't know before. Secondly, I think we've learnt that things can change very, very fast. When you have an emergency, the way society operates, we turned it around in a week or so. And so we've always, as Greens, been told, you just want things to change too fast. The world doesn't move that fast. Well, that's clearly not true. And thirdly, of course, people did have an experience, particularly during the first lockdown, where they suddenly realised the air didn't smell of diesel fumes anymore, that, commuting 2 hours each day with your arm stuck in someone else's face pit really wasn't a great armpit, isn't a great way to live. And people were really, saying, we want to do things differently. There's the survey that came out that said 80% of people said they didn't want to go back to the way things were. We need to build something better. And what we're doing now is trashing the planet and creating a miserable, unequal, unhealthy society. We can tackle both of those things together.
Natalie Bennett, Baroness Bennett and Lord Deben, thank you both.
You don't believe me. You will, Dr.